memiliki kelebihan dan kekurangan. Tidak ada yang salah memilih salah satu cara tersebut. Bubur tidak diaduk tampak indah karena taburan bubur seperti ayam suwir, cakwe, seledri, daun bawang, bawang goreng, dan kedelai goreng masih tertata di atas bubur. Kekurangannya, bubur tidak diaduk kurang nikmat karena tidak ada perpaduan rasa antara bubur, kuah bumbu, dan topping di atasnya. Sementara itu, jika bubur diaduk, semua taburan akan bercampur. Warnanya menjadi coklat dan menghilangkan nafsu makan bagi sebagian orang. Akan tetapi, di sisi lain justru menambah kenikmatan karena semua rasa berpadu. Selain itu, bubur diaduk juga mudah dicerna karena taburan yang bercampur menjadi lebih halus dan mudah untuk dimakan. Bubur diaduk maupun tidak diaduk memiliki kelebihan dan kekurangan. Kita harus saling menghormati pilihan masing-masing. Barangkali di masa depan ada variasi baru cara makan bubur. Nah, apakah kamu tahu termasuk jenis teks apa tulisan Budi tersebut? Ya, teks eksposisi. Apa itu teks eksposisi? Teks eksposisi merupakan teks yang memberikan informasi sekaligus memberikan gagasan atau pendapat terhadap suatu topik. Struktur dari teks eksposisi ialah pernyataan umum atau tesis, argumentasi, dan penegasan ulang. Teks yang ditulis Budi telah memenuhi fungsi dan struktur dari teks eksposisi. Mari kita lihat. Teks yang ditulis Budi menyampaikan pendapat mengenai bubur diaduk dan tidak diaduk sesuai dengan fungsi teks eksposisi, yaitu menyampaikan pendapat. Pernyataan umum atau tesis terdapat pada paragraf 1. Pada bagian ini, penulis memberikan pendapatnya pada suatu topik. Penulis menempatkan posisinya terhadap suatu kasus. Oleh karena itu, di bagian ini, pembaca dapat berada pada posisi setuju atau tidak setuju pendapat dari penulis. Kamu bisa saja setuju dengan Budi bahwa perbedaan cara makan seharusnya tidak menjadi masalah. Atau, kamu bisa saja tidak setuju, cara penting makan bubur memang perlu diperdebatkan. Bagian argumentasi ada pada paragraf 2 dan 3. Pendapat yang disebutkan pada tesis diulang kembali dengan disertai uraian argumentasi. Pada teks tersebut, diuraikan kelebihan tiap cara makan bubur. Cara menyusun argumentasi ialah dengan memberikan opini yang disertai dengan fakta pendukung. Opini merupakan pendapat atau buah pikir seseorang yang dapat berbeda antara satu orang dengan orang lainnya. Sementara itu, fakta merupakan hal yang memang terjadi. Misalnya, pada kalimat ini, bubur tidak diaduk tampak indah. Ini termasuk opini, karena tampak indah sangat subjektif. Nah, argumentasi tersebut diperkuat dengan fakta bahwa taburan bubur masih tertata di atas bubur. Pernyataan tersebut merupakan fakta karena memang terjadi. Oke, mari kita lanjut ke paragraf 4, paragraf terakhir, yaitu bagian penegasan ulang, penegasan pendapat pada pernyataan umum atau tesis. Nah, kita juga dapat mengkritisi teks eksposisi loh. Caranya, lihat pendapat pada pernyataan umum atau tesisnya. Apakah uraian argumentasi mendukung pendapat pada pernyataan umum? Lihat argumentasi yang disusun. Lihat opini dan faktanya. Apakah faktanya valid? Apakah faktanya mendukung opini? Jika kita lihat kalimat berikut, taburan bubur yang masih tertata tentu merupakan fakta. Semua orang dapat melihat hal yang sama. Jika tidak diaduk, ya, taburannya masih utuh tertata di atas bubur. Akan tetapi, apakah taburan yang masih tertata berarti bubur tampak indah? Kamu bisa jawab, iya, karena enak dipandang dapat disebabkan oleh komponen di dalamnya yang tertata. Tapi, apa menurutmu enak dipandang? Seharusnya tidak hanya karena tertata, tetapi juga komposisi warnanya menarik. Apakah kamu mulai ragu? Nah, teks eksposisi merupakan teks yang bersifat argumentatif, teks yang disusun atas opini-opini dan fakta-fakta. Kamu tetap perlu mengkritisinya. Tidak semua pendapat yang disajikan kamu telan begitu saja. Di sisi lain, jika kamu adalah penulis, sajikan opini dan fakta sekuat mungkin agar orang-orang terpengaruh dengan pendapatmu. Tapi, gunakan pengaruhmu untuk memberikan gagasan yang positif ya. Jika sudah paham bagaimana cara menyajikan pendapat melalui teks eksposisi, Kamu dapat memberikan pendapat pada isu-isu yang lebih besar, seperti pada masalah-masalah di bidang pendidikan, ekonomi, politik, sosial, dan sebagainya. Kamu dapat juga memperkuat argumentasi dengan memberikan fakta-fakta berupa data-data yang akurat dari sumber yang dapat dipercaya. Oke, jangan takut berpendapat, berpendapatlah dengan santun dan cerdas. Sampai jumpa! Wah, telat. Gawat, gawat. Ma, aku berangkat dulu ya.
Kamu nggak sarapan dulu?
Enggak, Ma, udah telat. Assalamualaikum.
Waalaikumsalam.
Fadil さん、どうしたの？病気？
はるかさん。いいえ、お腹が空いています。
朝ごはん食べませんでしたか？
まだです。
どうして？
朝、寝坊しましたから。
そうか。
おはようみんな。あ、ファディルさん、どうしてですか？気分が悪い？
いいえ、まだ朝ごはんを食べませんから、お腹が空いています。
そうか。
じゃあこれ、食べてください。
いいですか？ありがとう。
いただきます。はるかさんはいつも朝ごはんを食べますか？
うん、
何を食べますか？
そうですね。ご飯、味噌、焼き魚、納豆。
あー、納豆ですか。食べたことがありますよ。でもあんまり好きじゃない。
私は納豆が好きですよ。ファディロさんは？
あまり好きじゃない。
どうして？納豆は健康のためにいいよ。じゃあミンさんは朝ごはん何を食べますか？
フォーを食べます。
フォー？
ベトナムのスープ。ライスそば、肉、ブロス。
なるほど。
じゃあファディロさんは？
そうですね。私は梨うどんが好きです。よく梨うどんを食べます。
梨
梨う
うどん？
どく？
ココナッツライス、卵、バーミセリ、テンペイ、クラッカー。
テンペイ食べたことがありますよ。おいしかった。
そうですよ。明日、テンペイを持ってきます。
ほんと？ありがとう。
明日もフォー持ってきますよ。
本当に？嬉しい。ありがとう。じゃあ今日の文系、朝ごはん何を食べますか？これを使って相手の朝ごはんのメニューを聞きましょう。こちらに食べ物の名前をつけて私たちのメニューを伝えましょう。例えば、フォーを食べます。梨うどくを食べます。パンを食べます。次、何が好きですか？これを使って相手の好きなものを聞きましょう。こちらに食べ物の名前をつけて私たちの好きな食べ物を伝えましょう。じゃあ今日の文芸覚えてくださいね。じゃあね。
Also, für unsere Party am Samstag habe ich die Einkaufsliste schon gemacht und habe auch sie in unserer Gruppenchat geteilt. Hast du sie schon gesehen?
Ja, hab schon gelesen. Für den Salat kann ich die Zutaten kaufen. Morgen habe ich vor, zum Markt zu gehen.
Schön. Ich kaufe dann die Getränke und Käse für die Pasta. Morgen nach der Vorlesung gehe ich zum Supermarkt. Morgen. Sie wünschen bitte?
Morgen. Ich hätte gern einen Salat und 500 Gramm Tomaten, bitte.
Alles klar. Sonst noch etwas?
Was ist heute im Angebot?
Heute sind Avocados, Erdbeeren und Kirschen im Angebot. Ein Kilo Avocados kostet nur 2 Euro, ein Kilo frische Erdbeeren für 80 Cent und ein Kilo Kirschen für 1 Euro.
Dann nehme ich ein Kilo Avocados und ein Kilo Kirschen, bitte. Haben Sie auch Zwiebeln?
Ja, wie viel brauchen Sie?
2 große Zwiebeln, bitte.
Okay. Noch etwas?
Nein, das ist alles.
Alles klar. Das macht alles 5,20 Euro.
Hier bitte.
Und 80 Cent zurück. Dankeschön.
Danke. Tschüss. Schönen Tag noch.
Tschüss. Gleichfalls. Hallo, guten Tag.
Guten Tag.
Ich brauche noch eine Tüte, bitte.
Eine Tüte kostet 50 Cent. Das macht alles 8,80 Euro.
Hier, bitte.
Brauchen Sie den Zettel?
Ja, bitte.
Also, hier ist der Zettel und 1,20 Euro für Sie. Danke. Schönen Tag noch.
Danke. Ihnen auch. Und wie kauft man Lebensmittel in eurem Heimatland ein? Ist das anders wie bei uns in Deutschland?
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the second day of the 12th AISOFOLL. We are now heading to the plenary session 2. The agenda for this session is presentation from Ms. Frances Sinanu and Dr. Randall Martin. This session is chaired by Ms. Nia Kurniawati from Universitas Surya Kancana. Ms. Nia, the floor is yours.
Can you hear my voice? Okay. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, everyone. First of all, I'd like to thanks to the organizer for having me to be the moderators of the second plenary sessions of the 12th Annual International Symposiums of Foreign Language Learning. And I am Nia Kurniawati. I'm from Universitas Surya Kencana. It is so delightful to inform you that today we have two outstanding keynote speakers, and they have joined us at the Zoom room. So I'd like to address Miss Frances and Mr. Randall Martin. Good morning. Are you there? Yeah, and they are invited to address this year's themes of the AISOFOLL, the use of technology to assist teachers and students in language learnings. So they will talk about artificial intelligence and international educations. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, as the moderators of the house, I would remind you about some notifications of these blended sessions. So the presenter would have 40 minutes. Each of the presenter will have 40 minutes for presentations. And because we are in the blended modes, also I would remind the participant in online setting, during the presentations, the online participants are required to mute the audio but turn on the video to be more engaged. And you are not allowed to use annotation features. And for the Q&A sessions, it will be conducted after the two keynote speakers finish their presentation for 50 minutes. And the on-site participants will have the opportunity to give the question first directly, so prepare your question from now on. And for the online participants, you may have the questions written on the chat box. And the committee will later choose several questions from the online participants. And don't forget to mention your names, institutions, and also to whom the questions is addressed. And the next is to give appreciation and to be more engaged in these discussions. If I ask you to give applause for the offline participant, you may give round of applause. And for the online participants, you just write clap, clap, clap on the chat box. Okay, so before we jump up to the first and hot topic about the artificial intelligence injected language into language classes from theory to practice, let me read the short bio of our first keynote speaker this morning. So let me introduce our first keynote speaker, Ms. Frances Sinanu, MA. She is a faculty member at the Faculty of Language and Art, Universitas Kristen Satya Wacana. She is a language teacher and teaching trainer. She has taught English and Indonesian to foreign speakers in Indonesia and the US. She obtained her master's degree from Teachers College, Columbia University. She is the board member of ITEL, or Indonesia Technology Enhanced Language Learning, and her key areas of research are language and culture, technology, and language learning and teaching. So, ladies and gentlemen, without any further ado, please welcome Ms. Frances Sinanu. Ibu Frances, the floor is all yours.
Thank you, Ibunia, for your wonderful introduction. Good morning, my fellow teachers. Welcome to my session. It's still quite early in Jakarta. Yeah? I happen to be in the Central Indonesia time, so I'm quite okay. But for those at the venue, you're there at this early hour, so thank you for joining my session. Allow me to share my screen now of my presentation today. As Ibunia already introduced, I'm a faculty member at Satya Wacana Christian University at the English Language Education Department. I train teachers in the pre-service teacher training program to become English teacher. I'm also one of the board members of ITEL, Indonesia Technology Enhanced Language Learning. ITEL is based at Satya Wacana Christian University. So I gave the title of my session, AI Injected Language Classes from Theory to Practice. And as the title suggests, I will talk a little bit about the definition of artificial intelligence in education and also in language teaching. And I will showcase the practical experience of using AI tools in my teaching context. So I'm going to give you examples of what I've been doing in my speaking and writing classes at my university. And then we can discuss some pedagogical implications. I can see that we have teachers here, even yesterday in the session, already sharing their experiences using many technology as the theme of this conference. But I would like to start with the definition, and I have several definitions here. I know it's probably a little bit boring for you, but let's just see so that we can get to know AI better. A simple Google search will give you this definition. Artificial intelligence, the theory and development of computer system able to perform tasks that normally require human intelligence. So you can see that the Oxford Dictionary define artificial intelligence as visual perception, speech recognition. Those are the tasks that normally require human intelligence, but now the computer can do that. This definition is along the way with other definitions from researchers. But what I want to show is that we live with artificial intelligence. When you play chess with your computer as the opponent, you are dealing with artificial intelligence. When you play solitaire, for example, you are also dealing with artificial intelligence. Google Map. Now everybody uses Google Map. You cannot go anywhere without knowing how to get there. And that is also the artificial intelligence tools. So it's not new, although now it's really fancy, but it's not new. It went back to 1956 when John McCarthy, the father of artificial intelligence, wrote in his proposal about a study to proceed the benefits and investigate further on what machine can do and what other features of intelligence that in principle can be described that a machine can be made to stimulate it. So it is long time ago. And that definition also, that history also carries away until today. I highlight some important things. Artificial intelligence are machines or computer systems that imitate cognitive functions. So cognitive functions that are normally associated with human mind. That's by Rosalind Novick. This one, artificial intelligence are a computer which performs cognitive tasks, which is usually associated with human mind. So tasks associated with human minds. I like this definition as well by the Encyclopedia Britannica. Intelligent being. So the tasks that are commonly associated not only with the minds, but I highlight this part, adapt to changing circumstances. So it's not static anymore, but artificial intelligence can adapt as well because it is associated with intelligent beings. This one is also interesting. I want you to see at the highlighted part. It is a computer technologies or set of computational technologies inspired by, that's the key word, inspired by, but typically operate quite differently from the ways people use the nervous systems or bodies to sense, learn, reason, and take action. So I think yesterday in the first plenary, people ask questions, teachers ask questions to you, and I think about whether the teacher's going to be, translators or interpreters going to be replaced. Now, the answer is no, because the artificial intelligence are inspired by, but they will operate differently. And that's why teachers, you are still needed. This is a definition that I use in most of my studies on artificial intelligence, because artificial intelligence are computer systems that designed to interact with the world through capabilities and also they can take sensible action that we would think as essentially human. So from those definitions, I was inspired by this book by Matthew Montebello, and that's why the title of my talk is Using the Injected, inspired by Montebello's book. He proposes three things here when using artificial intelligence. That artificial intelligence incorporates social aspects. It allows personalizing learning environment, and it increases your motivation or the student's motivation in learning in education context, and that is of course in language teaching as well. Now, this is the first computer, artificial intelligence, that is used in education. This is Plato, back in the 1960s at the University of Illinois. And now we have all these fancy tools, right? We have all these cool apps that our students use, and we also use it. I'm sure you are familiar with some of the tools here. And there's too many to mention. There are too many to list. We don't have the time and energy or the class students to actually try and use all of this, right? I am limited in my knowledge and experience of using the tools based on what I'm teaching. And that's why this meeting or such meetings like today is very important, because we can share our knowledge. We can add to the banks of tools that we can use. Yesterday in the plenary session as well, teachers are asking Russell about how, what tool can we use for this, what tool can you use for that? It's unlimited now. So having said that, teachers, we have 108 participants here with the operator and others. I would like you now to participate in creating this bank of collection of tools or AI tools that you have used in your classrooms. But before that, can you give me some, okay, hang on, no, not this one. All right, I want to jump here before I go there. Okay, so I want to see some reactions. Have you used AI tools in your language classrooms, teachers? If you have, can you give me some love? Just give me the love reaction in your Zoom application there. Okay, we have Ibu Leli Novia. You love, okay. Let me see. Only one. Can you find the love button? The reaction? Okay. All right, we have Ibu Mahmuda. Okay. Not so many, but maybe because you are... Okay. Maybe because you're not here yet. Don't worry about it. I want to go down to this part. Artificial intelligence in language education. An article in 2019 by Pokriv Chakova summarizes this 7 uses of artificial intelligence in language education. The first one is getting personalized learning materials. As you can see in those apps, probably you have used some language learning apps. You can get personalized learning materials. I will show you later with one of the apps that I use in my classroom. Language classrooms also make use of the chatbots. If you cannot find people to practice, especially now in the pandemic where students are isolated in their own houses, then they can converse with chatbots. They can also use machine translation tools in their language learning. Applying AI-powered language learning software. There are many apps and softwares available now. This is one of my favorite as well, AI writing assistants. How many of you, when you write something, you check your grammar, you check your language for spelling, you are using writing assistants that is artificial intelligence. And a lot of students also rely on intelligent tutoring system, ITS. And then as the first plenary session yesterday talked about virtual reality, that's also one of uses of artificial intelligence in language education. So I guess now I'm going to invite teachers to share. If you can go to this link, you can scan the QR code, or you can type the, I'm gonna copy the link to you. I want you to contribute here. I'm gonna give a few minutes for the teachers to look at my Padlet there. And if you have used a particular tool in your language classrooms to teach, or that you know your students use for them to learn, please contribute here, okay? So I'm gonna stop sharing this one now, and I'm just gonna go to my Padlet. Let me copy first so that everybody can also go to the Padlet. Okay. We have some already uploaded there. I'm gonna wait for a moment, teachers. Hang on, let me share my the QR code once more. And please go to the Padlet and share the tools that you have used in your language classrooms. Maybe that you use to teach, or that you use, that you know your students use for their own learning. Okay, so can you see the Padlet now? Okay. Sure. Let me copy the link and share it to everybody in the chat. One moment. Okay. All right, so I already shared the link, and I can see that people are adding to the list. Wonderful. So I hope that this list, you can go back to this list later on. You can refer to it when you need ideas on which tools or which apps you can use for speaking, writing, listening, reading, vocabulary, pronunciation, grammar, and other language classroom activities that's not included in the category. So I'm going to share now the Padlet to see what people are writing. Okay, so as you can see here, for speaking, people using Ori. I think there's a video by Samuel in the morning and yesterday as well. You can see that. We have InspiroBot, we have SpeechNote, writing, Grammarly is very famous here. Listening, we have lyrics training, Story reading, we have Quillbot, ReadLang. For writing, we also have PaperRater. Okay. For vocabulary, we have Semantris, we have Replica, and then for pronunciation, we have Elsa. For grammar, we have Grammarly. For language learning, we have Memrise and Duolingo, CD and Eliza, to enhance speaking among. Okay, I've never heard of the tools you listed here. Okay. All right, so the teachers listed here, yeah, all the tools here. These are the tools that you have used in your classrooms. I asked some of my colleagues to also start the list earlier today. So you are adding to the list of the tools that people are using. Okay, so this is interesting. I've never used many of the apps here. Flipgrid, okay. Ibu Christine Pramata, you use Flipgrid, yeah. Story Nori is good and engaging app for kids to practice listening skills. Ah, okay. All right. Okay, so I'm gonna keep the list going. You can continue adding to the list, but I want to go on to my slide here. Okay, so artificial intelligence in language classroom. I hope if you need help with which tools, you can go to this Padlet and you can get inspired to and try. You just need to try, because there are unlimited possibilities for your language classrooms. So I'm going to share you some examples from my language classes at my university. So keep in mind that the level is adult, a university, and there are pre-surface English teachers. So the materials and the way I tailor the lessons using the tools might be different from your teaching context. The first one is in speaking classes. So what I did is I used Ori, but I would like to give some notes that Ori is not free anymore. So what I did was back in the 2017, 2018. Now I don't use it anymore because it's not free anymore. But if you have the capacity to purchase the app for your students, then this is what I did. But I did this with a free 1 minute package or version of Ori. So I did it for my impromptu speech class. So first of all, I assigned random topics. I found it from the internet on impromptu speech. Impromptu speech is in my class is in a speaking class is for focusing on their fluency more than accuracy. And then I give 1 minute to prepare, and then the students deliver the speech. Now, after they deliver the speech for 1 minute, while they are delivering the speech, I record them using Ori. If the students cannot install Ori on their phone, then they can use my Ori app. And then after that, the students study the result, because the result will automatically appear on their phone. In my experience using this in my class is I printed it. The office is very close to my class, so I can just go to the office and then print it, and then I give to the students for them to analyze the transcript. So what I like about Ori at that time is this is really a public speaking app, not for foreign language learners, but for native speakers of English as well. So it has transcript, it has all the features, the other features that you need as a public speaker. And then students revise the transcript, and then they practice, they read, and they record on their own at home if they install Ori at home. So this is the example of what my students did. So I mentioned earlier that I printed it, and then I bring it to class, and I use it as part of my teaching. So it's not, I make use of the technology so that the students can actually get the transcript and revise, and then realize, oh yeah, I don't really know how to organize my ideas, and then they rewrite it and then they record it again. Now I'm going to share you what the original recording here. So this is the first transcript from Ori. This is back in 2017 or early 2018, I quite forgot, but Ori still has it, the link, so it's really good. This is my student. As you can see, the score is 53%. And you can hear the recording as well. Make sure I share this now.
Good morning, guys. Today,
Excuse me,
my topic is about
and then you
fools
can see the
and their
transcript.
money are easily parted.
Okay, so in 1 minute, the students can only do this much, and that's why she needed more practice. So she went home and she practiced and she recorded over and over and over and over. And then I asked the students, okay, as you can see the last step here, the students share the result of their best one. So what happened with my student Monica here is she sent me the revised version. Can you see here? Good morning, Francis. This is my 20th recording. Now, teachers, do you have energy and time to listen to your students repeating the same speech 20 times? Of course not. But this is why we need the technology, and we leave it to Ori to listen and assess the students there. Um, Now let's hear the improvement. We can see that the score now is 71 from 53. So according to Ori, there is an improvement in my student's speech. And you can see in the transcript, she has more ideas. Yes, yesterday we also had teachers ask questions. How do you know whether the students are really speaking or reading? It doesn't matter. The fact that they practice for 20 times, they record themselves for 20 times, it means they are learning something. So don't worry about that, okay? Now that is with Ori, but then when Ori became a paid version and it keeps asking you to subscribe to buy a package or annually or monthly, I say goodbye to Ori. But before that, from my research, I did a study in 2018 about this, of interviewing my students and see their progress. Ori improved the students' pronunciation from the repeated practices. Ori increased language awareness when looking at the transcript. They got better organization of ideas from reading the transcript and also from revising the speech. Definitely increased in fluency and gained their confidence. So we moved to Flipgrid. I think people added Flipgrid in the Padlet as well. For the same reason, transcript, because Flipgrid provides transcript for students. And um, this is what I did. It's the same procedure, except that Flipgrid is not a public speaking app. Flipgrid is a video communication, video media. So it doesn't have the pace recognition, energy level, confident like Ori has. So what happened here is just we are making use of the speech recognition feature of the artificial intelligence in Flipgrid. But the procedure is the same. We assign the students for 1 minute and then we record, we ask them to record on their own. I actually did Flipgrid last year when the pandemic started because we cannot meet in face-to-face for my speaking class. Now, we also use Zoom. You can activate the live transcription on Zoom, and then the students practice their speaking, especially for presentation, and they record it, and then they get the transcript, and they analyze the transcript, and they watch the video, watch the recording. They can see the non-verbal communication, their eye contact, facial expression. Also, they listen to their voice. So it's really good to practice on presentation, especially now that everything is done via Zoom, including this conference. So that's for speaking. Now for pronunciation classes, we use ELSA. I don't know if you're familiar with ELSA, but this is a video of the recording of ELSA that I did earlier today. So,
Hi there, nice to meet you. My name is Elsa.
This is a test at the beginning of when you start ELSA. ELSA asks you questions helps them in learning pronunciation. Another tool is for students who cannot download ELSA, because remember, we use ELSA as an individual practice outside of the classroom for them to identify their weakness, which sounds that they still need to work on, and then practice to improve. So for students who cannot download ELSA on their phone, we ask them to use Google. You can just type any word and then Google will show you how to pronounce it. So I have a video here, a screenshot. I'm not sure how reliable my internet, so I prepare everything in the video. You can see there are British pronunciation and American pronunciation, but a British pronunciation doesn't have the practice mode. American pronunciation has the practice mode. So if you're teaching your students using American pronunciation book, like what we did we do in our university, symposium, you can use this. You can speak, practice, and then it will tell you that, okay, you still have problem with the schwa sound here, but you are better. You are improving. You see here, there's a better sign here. And once you practice again, you speak, record yourself, and then you get it right, then they will say, good job, okay? So this is pronunciation. Writing. Okay, I have a good story for my writing class. I'm teaching academic writing, not for my English language education department, but for the economics department. So students, they are writing their final thesis in English because they belong to the international class. And I got this email. I'll let you read for a moment. I'm teaching them academic writing, and they sent me this. It makes me wonder, am I a writing teacher, or am I a language editor or a translator, or just to proofread what they did in their translation? So this triggered me to look into Google Translate. And I used this in that particular class with my students. I said, okay, so now bring your computer. Let's work with Google Translate, because you really like Google Translate. I always say, if you cannot beat Google Translate, use Google Translate, okay? Don't compete with Google Translate, because the students are using it anyway. So what I did is I asked the students to translate one paragraph using Google Translate from their English text, because they have already written in English, and back translate into Bahasa Indonesia. And then what we did is we discussed the error analysis as part of the class discussion. And I spent time with the students to discuss their errors and to learn from that error. So what happened here is Google Translate is my assistant to quickly identify or quickly provide the data for the students to notice what is the problem with their English. I did a research on this, and I presented at the conference in Macau in 2018, Asia TEFL, and this is what I found, that students develop their language awareness of the errors, and then they know that that errors may hinder communication. Students also become more interested in learning from noticing the mistakes. I forgot to mention as well that because it is back translation, they realize that if they are using Google Translate at the beginning to translate from Indonesian to English, and then in my class I ask them to back translate into Indonesian, you can see that if their Bahasa Indonesia is not good, then the Google Translate will not be able to translate it good as well. The students get to understand that the danger of dependency on machine translation. So these are the results of my study using Google Translate in my writing class. Now, next is, this is a fun part. I only have a few minutes left, but we use this in our narrative writing class at the university. How many of you are familiar with plot generator? So plot generator is artificial intelligence writing stories, writing plots, writing twists, creating many things. And what we did is we asked the students, we used this plot generation to do 4 things. These are the 4 activities that we can do in our narrative class or narrative writing classes. First, we can compare the final stories. So we ask the students to fill in the blanks that is provided by the plot generator, and we ask them to write, and then we will compare their writings with the machine. Another one is the students continue the story that already generated by the plot generator with different twists. Or the students continue the story from the first line provided by the plot generator. And finally, the students edit the stories that are generated by the plot generator to make them sensible and logical, because the machine writes stories that are not so logical. So this is the plot generator. Let me see if I can take you very quickly. I know we don't have a lot of time, but this is the plot generator, teachers, and maybe this is scary at the first time when you have to teach outside in this pandemic. You don't meet your students, and trust is a big issue here, right? But this is the plot generator, and this is what we did in our class: is we choose the plot generator and we ask the students, okay, name what is the title? And then the students can choose whether the title is named after the protagonist. What do you want the opening to be? Okay, so this is very good to teach the narrative writing structure. That these are what should be in a story. You should have conflict. You should have opening. You should have characters. And then you have dialogues in the narrative writing, okay? So I'm just gonna, we don't have time, so I'm just gonna fill the entire form with random ideas. So now it is completed, ladies and gentlemen, and within, okay, what is your pen name? AISOFOLL, okay? And then with one click, the machine will write you the story. So this is a story by AISOFOLL, Intuitive Darts Chen, okay? The machine writes this. And at first, teachers at my faculty as well, they feel like, oh no, how can we tell that it is their work or the machine's work? We can, because if you read, it doesn't make any sense. Sometimes it's funny, and the students, this is why we did the activity of editing, revising the story before, and then they can publish their stories as well. So this is the activity that we did with story generator, masterpiece generator. If you go to the link, you can see many things that people can do with that. Okay, so before I end my presentation, I want to discuss these final words for teachers. Pedagogy comes first, technology second, or third, or fourth, or fifth, okay? So it's not about the technology. Just because a tool seems cool doesn't mean that it is useful for your students' language learning. And also remember that AI will not replace you, but you have to adapt. You have to change your teaching style. You have to change your teaching role. You're no longer the center of all the information, but you are helping them to use whatever resources available. You have to overcome your fear of technology, fear of being out of your comfort zone, fear of lose the dominant position in your classroom, fear of weakening control over your students. You have to relearn, unlearn what you've learned in your teaching practice so far, and then relearn how to deal with this artificial intelligence in environment that our students are living now. So with that, I like this quote by Kirsten Campbell. If students are using AI-powered language learning tools in their own time, then you can use the classroom times to optimize and focus on the skills and capabilities that no machine can yet deliver for them. Thank you so much for listening. And if you want the link of my presentation here on Canva, you can scan the QR code. I can also give you the link later on. Thank you so much for listening, teachers.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Frances, and please give big round of applause for Ms. Frances. And as I have told you, just clap, clap, clap if you are or is it watching it online? All right, so ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for Miss Frances. And I think now we have more understanding about artificial intelligence, but I believe that it also triggered some questions, but hold on for a moment, because we still have one more outstanding keynote speaker that will elaborate the issue of importance of language training in global mobility. But beforehand, I'd like to read the brief bio statement of our next keynote speaker. Dr. Randall Martins has experience spanning 30 years in post-secondary educations, development educations, project management and implementations, and international educations, having worked on projects in institutions, in societies, and most recently, leading the British Columbia Council for International Education Canada, a crown corporation of the province of British Columbia charged with advancing the provincial agenda in international education. He has authored and co-authored numerous papers, is also a regular presenter at national and international conferences and symposia, and regularly engaged in external reviews and consultation for institutions and other jurisdictions. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Randall Martins. Dr. Randall Martin, the floor is yours.
Terima kasih banyak. Thank you so much, Ibu Nia. I'm afraid I'm a bit of a old guy in terms of technology, so I was so impressed with Ibu Frances's presentation on artificial intelligence and the classroom. I can't even get the proper backdrop for my Zoom meeting here, so please apologies for that as well. And I'm going to ask Ibu Nia and her colleagues to forward the slides for me. The title of my session today is The Importance of Language Training in Global Mobility. And maybe on to in Canada, we have no National Ministry of Education. And so the province of British Columbia, we are supported by and funded by government to help choreograph the whole international education sector in British Columbia. We are the most Pacific province in Canada, so we share an ocean with you in Indonesia and the Philippines. My own background was, in fact, an undergraduate degree in English literature and linguistics, master's degree in applied linguistics, and I started doing English language training. My first major job, in fact, was in Indonesia, and I really wish I was there with you right now. I worked on a project in eastern Indonesia where I stayed in Maluku at Universitas Patimura for 3 years, and then 1 year in Jakarta, where we had our project offices at Dirjen Dikti. And so I masih bisa sedikit bahasa Indonesia, tapi lupa hampir semuanya. Jadi lebih baik saya bicara bahasa Inggris hari ini. But I realized, just in terms of utilizing or doing my job back in Indonesia, this was the late 1980s and early 1990s. It was the learning of another language was fundamentally important to what I did. Now, I started off as an expert. I was working on the language training component of a project where we would train the young docent from the universities in Ambon, in Manado, in Manokwari and Jayapura, and then do EAP 1, EAP 2, and then send those students on to master's degrees or PhD degrees in either Canada or Thailand, depending upon the level of English proficiency that they got. And it struck me that the success of that program, the success of those young scholars, was based solely on their English ability, on the English language fluency they got, and that sort of has inspired the talk today on sort of the importance of language training in global mobility. So a bit of an apology or a caveat here at the beginning is I used to be an expert in English language training. I no longer am. I'm now a bureaucrat. I'm an administrator. So my presentation will be nowhere as detailed as those that have gone before me. It'll be 30,000 feet and fairly macro level. Now, I don't know, is it possible for you folks to change the slides for me? Good, to go to the next slide. There we go. So this is basically a quick sort of roadmap. I just like to talk a little bit about mobility, what mobility looks like, and the global context for mobility, and then again try to reinforce the importance of language training, not just English language training, but language training in global mobility, and how it's both a geopolitical tool and an economic tool and a social mobility tool in terms of advancement. So if we could go on to the next slide then. So throughout this presentation, I'll be speaking of language learning as important to global mobility. But the reality is I'll be mostly speaking about English. Since language training has become such a major part of the education world, it is largely focused on English language training. And while global trends and shifting geopolitical tides may be turning, English remains the most spoken language in the world and also the language of global commerce. The mobility of students and scholars between centers of learning predates both the nation state and the university. Aristotle of Macedon was a student of Plato in Athens, perhaps one of the first foreign students on record. More recently, post-Cold War global stability has been fundamental to the success of international higher education. And the very history of modern export education, what we now call international education, was founded on the mobility of upwardly mobile students, primarily from non-English speaking countries, traveling to study English or to study in English in one of 5 English speaking countries: the United States, the United Kingdom, Australia, New Zealand, and Canada. English was and continues to be perceived as the global language of commerce and of the academy, and thus an English education was deemed to be an avenue to academic and professional success. For geopolitical and other reasons, historically, other languages such as Russian, French, Spanish, German, even Portuguese, and more recently, Chinese, have been globally or regionally important and widely studied, all promising pathways to success for the gateway of language learning. Next slide, please. So what is mobility? It will be good to start off to define what we mean by mobility. The ability to move or be moved freely and easily, to move between different levels in society or employment, the ability or tendency to move from one position or situation to another, usually a better one. The term mobility refers to border crossing, whether a real border or a societal border. For temporary study, sorry, that's my dog. For the study of a whole program, for mid-career international experience or employment in another country. Mobility can be described as outward mobility related to the country of origin, or as inward with reference to the country of destination. It can be upward mobility, very rarely downward, at least unintentionally downward. So I'm positing that there are 4 types of mobility that I'd like to speak about today, all supported by language learning. The first is academic mobility, the movement of students or scholars to centers of learning. Now, this has been greatly hampered by COVID, but 2 years ago, pre-pandemic, in 2019, there were at least 7 million students globally studying in other countries. Education mobility is at an all-time high. In 2012, figures indicate that close to 4.5 million students were enrolled in institutions outside of their own country, more than double what it was in 2000. So there's been an annual growth rate of at least 7% until the pandemic hit in terms of students studying in other countries. For some time, again, the predominant destinations for these educationally mobile students have been English-speaking in Western countries, with Germany and France also very popular, together accounting for over 50% of the world's students in 2012. Now, China, again, for geopolitical and economic reasons, is now becoming a major destination for students to study as well. And again, these are geopolitical and economic forces that are encouraging students to go to China in terms of their own jobs and futures. So why academic mobility? It's only since World War II that nation states have actively supported structured mobility through programs such as Fulbright. Events between 1985 and 1995, Ronald Reagan, Margaret Thatcher, the fall of the Berlin Wall, the end of the Cold War, Tiananmen Square, all of these things conspired to relax borders, encourage mobility and trade, and they raised the speed and trajectory of globalization. It's not coincidental that this same period saw the birth of Erasmus within the European Union as part of this European Union trade bloc and nation building exercise, the creation of a North American NAFTA educational consortia, the repurposing of the term internationalization as the academic antithesis to globalization in 1994, and the birth of what we now call export education. It became imperative for governments to support globally literate populations, interculturalized workers, and interconnected economies. Now, universities may have always been international institutions, but globalization has altered the means and the manners of government support, altered attitudes towards revenue and expenditure, and branded education as an export service rather than a social good. But with COVID came the recent weaponization of interdependence, which globalization was really built on. The PPE, the personal protective devices, the vaccines, computer chips, the Nord Stream pipeline. These interconnected economies, cultures, and supply chains were all rapidly disrupted under COVID, and it will be very interesting to see how they come back. I believe personally that global economic recovery will increasingly restructure along regional lines with more local supply chains, and these will then color future mobility, and I believe with that, the importance of learning certain languages. Now, even before COVID hit, in terms of global student mobility trends, people were going much more regionally. Latin American students were staying in the Americas. Asian students were staying within Asia rather than crossing. Those were the major trends. The European students were staying within Europe. I think COVID has probably highlighted and accelerated those trends, and I think we will see in the coming years and decades changes in the priority that students give to certain languages. And educational mobility has often also been understood as a matter of resources. The traditional push-pull model suggests that students are pushed out of their home countries due to inadequate or inferior educational resources or economic prospects, and are pulled to foreign countries in order to obtain a better education, possibly a better job, or immigration. The mobility of academically oriented young people is currently a central link in the world system of higher education, and short-term language courses abroad are gaining in their popularity, I believe, mainly due to economic and socioeconomic reasons. So social and economic mobility. A growing body of research is pointing to the link between economic advancement and English language proficiency. And improved language skills are seen to be vital to improving employment prospects for youth, or a social and economic mobilizer. A recent British Council research report shows that workers in the Middle East and North Africa with an ability in English earn up to 3 times as much as non-English speakers. Employees with better English skills enjoyed salaries from 5% higher in a country like Tunisia to as high as 200% higher in a country such as Iraq, more than their counterparts with no English. In addition, the study found a positive correlation between poor fluency in English and unemployment. So English speakers are, rightly or wrongly, often seen to be more educated and can gain higher degrees of respectability. Globalization and the global marketplace have in some ways reinforced English as a global language of commerce. Upward progress in many companies is supported by ability in English, and the language is either desired or required for many other positions. Then labor mobility consists of changes in the location of workers, both across physical space and across a set of jobs, or occupational mobility. It refers to the ease with which laborers are able to move around within an economy and between different economies. It's also an important factor in the study of economics because it looks at how labor, one of the major factors of production, affects growth and production. Learning other languages opens international markets and creates job opportunities abroad. Today, being fluent in a foreign language seems to be essential within a globalized economy And, for example, if we look at the European Economic Union, one with no frontiers, it's linked to identity, citizenship, learning, and mobility. Nearly 42% of the world is bilingual. 66% of English speakers in the world learned it as a second language. A recent study looked at the biggest challenges facing future expatriate workers, and for them, far and above the other issues was knowledge of the local language and family relocation challenges. Other issues like taxes and visas and shipping and healthcare were far below those. Each year, approximately 75% of international assignments for expatriate workers end in failure. Over 60% of global mobility professionals indicated that the two biggest obstacles people face are the local language and family relocation. Several other key issues that impacted the success were also related to language, children's education, inclusion in the local community, and religious issues. So labor mobility, is not only about moving to where jobs are, but also about moving to where you can speak the language. Recent articles, most recently in The Economist, showed that even faced with high unemployment rates in Southern Europe, young, skilled labor force cannot really relocate within Europe for jobs to better off markets because of the language restrictions. For example, in Germany, the unemployment rate was at a relatively low 8%, with a shortage of qualified workers in the areas of engineering, IT, and healthcare. This would be a perfect place to escape job shortages in Spain and Greece, but only if you know the German language. That same article suggests that language has replaced work visas as the main barrier to mobility. And again, finally, migration, immigration. The term mobility refers to border crossing with varying degrees of permanence. Often mobility means a non-permanent border crossing. So migration, immigration or inbound migration, and emigration or outbound migration, in contrast to mobility, underscore the permanence of border crossing. As a migrant, as a refugee, as an investor immigrant, or as those whose parents immigrated from another country to the country of citizenship. Many countries will weight the applications of prospective immigrants, and I know my country, Canada, does this as well, more strongly if they speak the language of the intended country. So if you speak English or French, you have a much higher possibility of migrating to Canada than if you speak neither of those. And even refugees are screened for the language ability and normally given language training and cultural assimilation for all family members upon arrival in the new country. Next slide, please. Okay, this is an older version. Most languages spoken. I'm going to move. So the most languages spoken in the world and the most native speakers. This is quite interesting that there are, excuse me, these are in the wrong order for me. So in 2019, there were 7.8 billion people in the world. Now, close to 1.9 billion of those people, or 25% of the world population, was mobile in 2019, and in some fashion likely needed or could have benefited from some language training. Now, admittedly, a large chunk of those, about 1.5 billion people, were international tourists. And as you know, in Indonesia and elsewhere in Southeast Asia, not all of the tourists who arrive in your countries are fluent in your languages. But there are over 170 million migrant workers in different countries, or 4.9%, almost 5% of the global workforce. 130 million migrants and immigrants, 80 million refugees, and 7 million international students. Every one of these people, again, 25% of the world's population, could have benefited from language training or more advanced language training. It's also interesting in terms of the number of native speakers. English has about 1.35 billion speakers in the world, but only 370 million native speakers, while Mandarin Chinese has 1.12 billion speakers, but only 918 million. So it goes on and on to show that the importance of the language is not necessarily the number of people that are speaking that language. The next slide, please. This is the most native speakers. Again, just to reiterate that, Mandarin Chinese, Spanish, English does not have the highest number of native speakers, but it does have the highest number of speakers in the world. But again, Mandarin Chinese spoken in 2 or 3 countries, Hindi spoken in 1 or 2 countries, English spoken in multiple countries, the lingua franca of the European Union, this conference in Indonesia through ASEAN and through CEMIO is in English. And so I think the number of native speakers isn't necessarily correlated to the importance of the language globally. So the next slide, please. Thank you. So English is a geopolitical tool. A linguist, scholar Max Weinrich, wrote that a language is a dialect with an army and a navy. Now, I'm sure many of you have heard that before. His point is that the difference between a language and a dialect was ultimately a political distinction and had little to do with linguistics per se. If you look at the difference between Swedish and Norwegian, I hear this all the time because my brother-in-law is Swedish, and he says Norwegian people speak Swedish, only their mouths are full of meatballs when they speak. They're politically 2 different languages or 2 different dialects of the same language, but politically they are different languages because different nation states. You look at all of the dialects in China that are virtually unintelligible to one another, but are all called Chinese because this is one large nation state. So through the promotion of its language, a linguistic power is capable of ensuring influence on an international scale, guaranteeing a certain homogeneity. Conversely, a language can also be an agent of differentiation and cultural assertion, such as Catalan or Basque as opposed to Spanish. Throughout the course of history, certain languages have taken on the role of catalysts, benefiting cooperation between countries based on historic relations. So indeed, in the 19th and 20th centuries, the colonization of American, African, and Asian continents played a significant role in the expansion of Western languages. Spanish, English, Portuguese, French, even Dutch in Indonesia and a couple of other countries. So this historic past has ultimately brought together some countries that are geographically and culturally far apart. In doing so, faced with a unifying linguistic challenge, these cooperative politics underpin close collaboration between states on other strategic levels, such as culture, economy, social, and military. So among the 7,000 languages still in existence today, only 2.5% of them are spoken by nearly 90% of the world's population, which is more than 7 billion inhabitants. So within this maze of languages, there are nearly 1.5 billion English speakers, with Mandarin Hindi following close behind. But again, the number of countries where a language is spoken by order of number is English, French, Arabic, Spanish, and Portuguese, not Hindi or Mandarin, which do have a larger number of speakers. Yet when dealing with international exchange and diplomacy, it is the English, the language of Shakespeare, which has risen to the rank of the globe's lingua franca. So language and the learning of language through export education, mobility, through other means is a true geopolitical instrument and an instrument of social and economic mobility as well. Next slide, please. Yeah. I've actually missed a couple of slides here. We bounced through them a little bit. I did want to talk about the Worf-Sapir hypothesis a little bit in terms of the idea that language and culture, linguistic determinism, language and culture are absolutely interconnected. And I also wanted to talk about sort of the interconnected societies and supply chains and COVID. I really think that the importance of language training is fundamental to modern diplomacy, to modern economy. I do believe geopolitically things will come back and supply chains and globalization will return, that tourism will return, people will become mobile again, maybe more tentatively. But realistically, I think a reckoning about globalization was already present before COVID hit. The pendulum was already swinging against the sort of global world order. Democracy was in retreat. You see, even in the United States here and other countries around the world, authoritarianism was everywhere being rewarded, and walls were being erected. And then COVID then nationalized these supply chains, and in some ways, almost put an exclamation mark on the end of global liberalism. So we will have to see as we come out of this how mobility returns, how language training is fundamental to that physical mobility of people returning. In Canada, like many places around the world, probably the first and the hardest hit of our education sector in terms of COVID were the language schools. Many of the language training programs were not in public institutions, but private schools. In British Columbia, close to 40%, I believe, of all of the international students studying in the province were here studying in private English schools. We've lost over half of those in terms of just not being able to stay afloat. So there is this idea about why people are choosing to study English or study other languages, and the Worf-Sapir hypothesis talks about the way you view the world is colored by the language that you speak. And in fact, in learning another language, you become a much better employee, a much broader thinker, because you're also learning something of the culture, but you're also learning different ways to sort of chop up the world and how other people think. And this can only make you both a better citizen of a country, but also a better sort of globally mobile person. Linguistic determinism suggests that one's language determines the way your mind constructs categories and looks at the world. Propose that language patterns lead to different patterns in thought. A more accepted notion of this relationship between language and thought is, while they're interrelated, neither language nor culture creates a direct causal link to the other. In everyday terms, we hear and experience words that we use to influence our interactions with others, and yet, not having the same language do not always prevent us from understanding one another. This is called linguistic relativism. So regardless of which of these theories is right or wrong, both theories that suggest in learning a new language, you can provide ways to develop and maximize abilities in the host language to help learners address language in holistic ways, the linguistic, paralinguistic, and extralinguistic components of communication, to help to focus on a language, as well as appropriate interactional behaviors. Again, it's eye contact, it's personal space, it's body language, to help learners explore how language is shaped by culture and vice versa, to reinforce various communicative styles of the host language and the social factors that trigger the use of one or the other, and to help explore how languages differ and what they share in common, thus highlighting similarities and differences across the world. In terms of internationalization, which is a fundamental concept of higher education, of mobility, again, this was coined in 1994 after the fall of the Cold War. You know, happily for us, it was a Canadian woman, Jane Knight, who helped coin this. And this was really the antithesis to globalization, where globalization focuses on competition and sort of a jockeying for position over all else. Internationalization supported the idea that we have to have collegiality, partnerships, working together, working towards interculturalization, tolerance of ambiguity, acceptance of difference. And sort of the natural offshoot of internationalization has been interculturalization. Here in North America, especially in Canada, Australia, New Zealand, engaging with our indigenous cultures, indigenization in terms of respect for their languages, and really a renaissance, certainly in Canada, of teaching indigenous languages back to the young people, where for some years they were even outlawed. So really, I think language training, supporting global mobility, whether it's upward social mobility, whether it's migration, immigration, labor mobility, academic mobility. I believe language learning, language training is fundamental to both of these, to all of these activities. And again, as a generalist in this field, I can only applaud the work that you do, and actively support you. I'm sorry if there were no life-shattering revelations in my presentation today, but I did want to reinforce, I mean, in terms of my own career trajectory, but also in those of all of the students I see coming through Canada, through British Columbia, and globally, what you are doing and what is happening in the classrooms in terms of language training is absolutely fundamental to the personal success of those students, the academic success, and ultimately, I think, in terms of the cooperation and goodwill between nations. So I'm sorry if I've been a little bit disjointed here. I passed along, I think, an earlier iteration of my PowerPoint slides, but hopefully I got to the main points. So thank you very much. Terima kasih banyak.
Thank you very much, Mr. Randall. So once again, please give big applause for both Ms. Frances and Mr. Randall. And the audience or the participant online, just give clap for them. All right, thank you. So ladies and gentlemen, we have listened to two keynote speakers in this morning plenary sessions about AI from Ms. Frances and about international language from Mr. Randall. And I believe we have a very new information. Before I thought AI is only like Boston Dynamic or Sophia or things like Elon Musk related, but then we realized that actually we have used AI in our daily life, like Google Translations or maybe also Siri or Google Assistants, and it's quite interesting that those applications can be used in our teaching. And also we learned so much from Mr. Martin about the lingua franca and the use of international education. So what made me interested is the bubble that the English is the language of commerce, and then French is the language of love and food. I wonder what is Indonesia? What language is Indonesia? Yeah. So maybe later we can ask Mr. Martin, what is in Indonesia in his opinion? Bahasa Indonesia is what language? Is it language of food? For me, it's language of food. Okay, so while waiting for the online participants to give more questions, so as I have told you that for the offline participants, you may ask directly. If you have questions, I'll give 3 chances for the audience here to share the questions. You can ask to Ms. Frances or also to Mr. Martin, anyone? Okay, the gentleman over there 1, and then Ibu over there 2, okay? Please mention your names and institutions and to whom your questions is being addressed.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. My name is Arif Hussein Lubis from Universitas Pendidikan Indonesia. My questions are addressed to Ms. Frances and Mr. Randall. The first question is about using plot generator. Can it be applied to other genres, not only narrative writing, but also other types of writing? And is there any grading system, like the vocabulary can be graded, for example, for A2, B1, A1, A2, B1 until C2 level? The second question is addressed to Mr. Randall. Considering your presentation, in your perspectives, what needs to be really taken into account by language trainers in this more mobile, globalized, community-integrated, and technology-enhanced era in providing a quality language training for the students?
Okay, Ina, thank you.
Thank you.
Ibu Frances, would you answer it directly or you wait for another questions?
I think I can answer directly.
Okay.
So Pak
Arif.
Pak Arif, okay, Pak Arif from UPI. yes, you can use for other genre, because if you look at masterpiece generator, let me share my screen to show the masterpiece generator. I'm using, or I have used plot generator. These are the things that we used, the short story. We also have tried opening a line. So if you click on opening a line, let me just create a new tab. But you can also see here, so this is, the app is Masterpiece Generator. It has many things to generate. This is the top 10 one. You can use it for creative writing as well, when they can write freestyle song lyrics, so it doesn't have to be narrative only. But because I'm teaching narrative writing until today, and we are still using this plot generator. So this is the opening line. Sometimes people don't know how to start the story, so this is what you can do. And then twist generator, you can create a twist, and then the twist will, you can give it to your students, and then the students will have to write whatever story they want, but this is the twist. So the machine helps you to give ideas on what to write. So it is up to your creativity, Pak Arif, in terms of what you can use with these tools. But I guess it goes back to the main important thing is that it's not the technology. So you don't choose the technology and you're forced to use it in your class just because, oh, this is cool. But you choose technology because you need some help in completing your class. You need, for example, I use this to help me generate ideas quickly in seconds. I can just get ideas instead of I have to write it on my own. I think that's what I can say to respond to your question, Pak Arif.
Thank you. So the key word is creativity, forces. Okay, so the second question is addressed to Mr. Randall. Would you answer the question from Mr. Arif?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, I 100% agree that for me, Bahasa Indonesia is the language of food. I cannot wait to be back to Indonesia to have some fabulous food. I also noticed that your conference is in the for the face-to-face people is in the Meridian Hotel. When I lived in Ambon, every time I would come to Jakarta, I would stay in the HI, the Hotel Indonesia, which, as I recall, is right across the street from there. So I envy you where you are right now. I noticed one of our colleagues here also said Bahasa Indonesia, language of beauty. I will also agree with that, absolutely. In terms of Pak Arif's sort of question about what to take into account in terms of people's learning, I believe it's important to sort of accommodate their intentions. Maybe this is not at the complete basic level, but what are their intentions? Are these young people who, for example, in the Indonesian context, are planning to stay in Indonesia to facilitate employment prospects? Are these people who are maybe planning to study abroad? And frankly, when you study abroad, you never know what's going to happen. You can stay for another degree, you can fall in love, you can get married, there's all sorts of things that can happen. So you better learn English to speak with your new in-laws, possibly. But I think it's important to try to help articulate the intention of these students. Is it, for purely academic purposes, for social uses? And again, that sort of upward social mobility, even if these students in your context never leave Indonesia, I think it's important for them to have English and to be able to use that.
Okay, is it clear, Mr. Arif? All right, so the next person would ask question is the lady with the red veil. Please mention your names, institutions, and to whom your questions is addressed.
Well, okay, thank you, Miss Moderators, for the time. Allow me to give my question. I'm Anna from University of Muhammadiyah Tangerang. And then here I would like to ask two questions actually. I address to both of the presenters here. The first I would like to ask to Miss Frances that relate to artificial intelligence. I really encourage you and we have to teach speaking here. Would you like to give me some suggestions related to what artificial intelligence is able to be used, which is able to correct our pronunciation and also cohesion or vocabulary use. Thank you. And then for the second question, I address to Mr. Randall. In terms of international communication here, actually we know that about English as corporate language. And then my question is, how do you recognize that corporate languages? Because as I know that there is some issues also talk that when we talk about the corporate language means we don't have to use a real grammatical use, or I mean here the structure of language is not really neat. While here we need to do the language training. That is why we involve or we create language trainings to improve our language. But here some issue talk that corporate language, the grammatical use is not really neat. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So, Ms. Frances, we have Ibu Ana from Universitas Muhammadiyah Tangerang, and she asked you about the suitable application for teaching speaking to correct the pronunciations, comprehension, and vocabulary.
Okay, Ibu Ana, I think probably when I was sharing about ELSA earlier, you got the people in the Le Meridien got electrical problem, yeah. So you probably get disconnected. But in my slide, I shared about the application ELSA. It's a pronunciation coach app, and it is very good to help students with their pronunciation. And it has a lot of free versions that you can use. Even if you don't pay, you can still learn a lot compared to other free trial. It's not really a free trial, it's just a free version. So you can try to use ELSA. Also, I encourage you to go to the Padlet and see what other teachers have added to the list there of AI or tools, apps that you can use in your language classroom. So here I can read from the Padlet. People put Orai, people put Inspire board, people put speech note, use Loom for presentation. So if you want to focus on pronunciation, you can also use ELSA. If you just want to practice on fluency, speaking, they can talk to chatbots, Inspire bot, or Cookie. I think we also have that, so you can try that out first. Thank you.
All right. I hope it's answering Miss Anna's questions. Elsa, your partner, Anna and Elsa, it's like a Frozen movie. Okay, and then the question for Mr. Randall about the international communication, English as a foreign language in Indonesia, because sometimes we hear teachers say to the students, do not really concern about your grammar as long as your fluency is okay. So what do you think about that?
Well, again, I think I go back to my my previous answer. I think it's in terms of intentions. I think if somebody's planning to do a master's degree or a bachelor's degree in North America, in Australia, the academic teachers will be much more strict. Teaching assistants, when they're marking, will be much more strict. But if you're in Indonesia, if you go to Jogja and walk down Jalan Malioboro and talk to those young people who are selling things, they'll be speaking English to me, and 2 minutes later they're speaking to somebody in Chinese, and then 2 minutes later they're speaking to somebody in Japanese, and they have never studied. It's basically a completely market bahasa, and the same in Bali, the same in Bangkok, and the same all over the world. If you go to Dubai, people who are basically working in tourism or working in some other trades, no tourist, nobody bargaining for a batik sarong is ever going to argue with their grammar or their ability in the language. So absolutely, I think it's completely about the intention of those students. Now, if you travel, and I go to probably too many international conferences, but for example, the European Association or API, the Asia Pacific Association for International Education, and I'm hoping maybe some of you will be able to join us. We'll be hosting that in Vancouver in March of 22, just in about 6 months' time, and hoping we'll be able to host that live. So many of the presenters there are non-native speakers. And for about 10 years, I taught a course with the European Association on English as the language of the international office within the universities. And this course was full of Europeans, Germans and Italians and Dutch people who were all terrified of speaking, of doing a conference presentation in English, because they felt, well, it has to be perfect. And we just reinforced time and again, no, it doesn't have to be perfect. Every English speaker in that audience probably doesn't even speak any other language. They are so forgiving. Like when I was studying Bahasa Indonesia in Indonesian, I could say anything and people would understand me and then tell me, lancar sekali, you're such a good speaker, very generous, very kind. I know they were lying to me, but even if you speak as a non-native speaker in English at a conference, people will understand you and people will be very forgiving. So in terms of having to have the exact grammar, if you're going to write a novel, a dissertation, a major paper, if you're going to do a degree in English, yes, work towards that. But for the rest of us, if it's for colleagues who may just want to give an international paper once a year at a conference in English, or pursue some other career in banking where you have to take out an American for dinner twice a year, I wouldn't worry about that at all.
Okay, thank you very much. And I still have one more chance. Okay, Ibu with the black veil. Please, once again, mention your name and institutions and also to whom your questions is addressed.
Thank you for the time. I'm Babai from Global Indonesia School, Serang, Banten. This is my question addressed to Miss France. Yes, I'm interested in this application is ELSA. I would like to ask one question. This is ELSA application is available for practice pronunciation other language like Chinese, Mandarin, or only for English learning? Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, Ibu Frances, is it also available for other languages to practice pronunciations, Elsa?
Thank you. That's a very good question. I don't really know, but we can check together. What I know is that it is for English only. So I haven't checked if they have other languages, but Elsa is your personal AI-powered English-speaking coach. So it is only for English, I think. I'm looking at the website at the moment. But it has languages from several countries. For example, Indonesian, they have Thai, and other languages if you're a native speaker of that language, and then they will cater the language of the instruction for your app to your native language. But I'm looking at the website now, and it's not available for other language because it is for English-speaking coach.
Okay, thank you. So for this time being, it's only English, Ibu. All right, so I think I will turn to the online participants. Okay, please be ready with your coffee. And we'll have some questions from the online participants. The first question from Gusti Wildayani from SMPN 1 Martapura is addressed to Ibu Frances. How effective is AI to develop students' creativity in language learning? Okay.
Ibu Gusti Wildayani. Well, AI is limited to what you use it in your language classroom. I would say that. So if you use it as a tool by itself, whichever tools you're using, it's probably cool or funky, or it's so fancy or sophisticated, but you decide how the tool can help your students' creativity. In terms of masterpiece generator, plot generator. I think it's very creative because the students can think about a different way to end the story, or how to make the story become sensible or reasonable, logical to the context of the students' context. They can be creative with that. But I would say that it's not the AI, but it's how we use the AI, how we use the machine, how we use the technology to foster creativity in our students.
Okay, I hope it's quite answering the question from the first participant in online platform. And the second questions? All right, to Mr. Random Martin from Ibu Sari SPD. The first question, recently there is a debate on the terms native English speaker. Some scholars state that it is no longer appropriate since English has developed in every corner of the world. Moreover, some areas of the world have their own English style and patterns, different from the US and British English. What do you think? And the second is about how do you think globalization and mobility affect the language learnings? Okay, Mr. Martin?
Thank you. If you remember I think they're still making them, the old Star Wars movies. One of them was called The Empire Strikes Back, and this was used quite often in the 1980s and 1990s with the British Empire, when all of these people from places like Jamaica and Ghana, all of these former British colonies, Nigeria, these people started migrating in huge numbers, Pakistan, India, to Britain, and just the cornucopia, the diversity of dialects and languages, some for the Queen's English speakers almost unintelligible. And even they talk about, the Americans and the British talk about, what do they say? The British and the Americans are two people separated by a common language, almost unintelligible to each other sometime. So there is no appropriate sort of standard of English. If you go to Jamaica, these people are speaking patois and English. It's all over the world. There might be a CNN or a BBC English or a CBC English in Canada, and certainly in terms of social standing, even if you look within the United Kingdom, you've got, if you come from Liverpool or Essex, people will look down upon you. And if you come from, London or certain parts of London, you'll have a much higher sort of snob appeal, or a much higher socioeconomic level of English. But absolutely, there are probably more native English speakers native English speakers in India than there are in the United States. Certainly more than in Britain. But you cannot, you can't say their English is of less value or less currency than that spoken in the motherland, so to speak, from Britain. So I don't know if that answered your question, but again, the geopolitical uses of language, if you have an American accent, maybe it cuts more weight than a New Zealand accent or Australian or something else, or British. But personally, I don't think it carries much weight at all. And then globalization and mobility. Again, what happened? Globalization has been around for 500 or 600 years, and essentially it's the movement of goods, people, currency across borders. And it just it accelerated after the Second World War, when borders opened, and then people say globalization went on steroids after the end of the Cold War, 1990. Everything exploded in terms of labor mobility, people moving around the world. And that's the same time, again, the European Union started Erasmus and started everybody's speaking in languages. The same time, I think the early 1990s, when the ASEAN economic bloc, APEC, was formed. And a couple of things came out of that, including CMEO, including the UMAP Student Exchange Consortium. So what happened, I think, in the early 1990s was this global explosion of people moving, of borders dissolving, relative, not absolute, but relative peace, increasing affluence, and people needing language to support that mobility. So I think they're directly interconnected. Again, I do like the discussion of the difference between globalization and internationalization, which really internationalization being, I think, a softer, warmer version of globalization in terms of non-competitive, supporting, it's not a north-south competition. It's basically a collegiality and partnership rather than competition. But all of these, again, have been supported by mobility. And again, in the last 30 years, I think that has changed dramatically. And what you professionals do as language teachers is very important for that.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Randall. And then the third questions. We still have more questions. Okay. For Ibu Frances and Mr. Randall. From Nurdiana from Universitas Bunda Mulia. Studies on AI or technology on language learning or teaching have been conducted over the past few years, to my knowledge. However, there have been not any studies yet claiming that technology, including AI, might foster language acquisitions. So what are the advantages of technology or AI actually on the language learning or teaching? Is it just for media of teaching learning, or is it really fostering still language acquisitions?
Actually, there have been plenty of studies conducted in terms of technology. I think most of the papers presenters in this conference also talk about the use of technology, right? And I'm sure they highlight on the benefits. I will edit my slide by adding some recent research on a study conducted on the AI, some advantages of the AI, and also some of the not so positive results of using the AI technology in your language classrooms. But I just want to show my students what I results earlier on how. Okay, I'm gonna share screen just quickly to see how practicing using ORAI can increase the score from 53% to 71%. And this is already the data on conciseness, confidence. They have energy, pace, and then also filler. One, one time or this one you can have 5 times but after practicing several times, now the becomes only 1. So this is just simple data that AI produces easily for us to see our students' progress and see whether the students actually improve in their language learning or not. And I welcome teachers to do their own research and also research on how to use technology, which method that you can use, but also to see the benefits of it, if it offers any benefits to your students. I think that's what I can say to answer the response to the question. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Frances. And Mr. Randall, and the question is also addressed to you.
Yes.
Is it on the media?
I'm happy. No, I'm happy to try to respond again. Ibu Frances will be the expert on the AI and the technology, but on a more sort of macro level. Really 2 years ago, how many of you had ever used Zoom? It's changed everything we do. It's changed everything we do. And what's it going to go back to? I'm being encouraged to go on an airplane flight next month, and I'm frankly scared. I used to live on airplanes, and I haven't been on one for almost 2 years. And do we really need the sort of physical mobility that we always had? We realize now that so much of what we need to accomplish in meetings and in pedagogy and in mobility can be done virtually. And it has just, again, if I can say on steroids again, the technological revolution in education has happened in the last 2 years. 10 years ago, people were talking about MOOCs, these massive online open courses, and they thought that was going to change education and universities would be turned into warehouses and nobody would go to school again. And that never happened. But in fact, it took this pandemic to force us all into the technology. Most of us will get back on airplanes. My major interest in this is sort of student mobility. I really like the fact that there were 7 million students traveling in studying in other countries. And I would like to see those students return. They're curious, they're young, they're healthy, they need to experience other things. But there will now, I think, always be some kind of virtual component in what they do, whether it's studying language or whether it's studying content. And the explosion in terms of, about COIL, the collaborative online international learning, where you have 2 or 3 different universities collaborating to create an online course for students from each of those institutions. So even if the students are still at home, they are studying under foreign teachers, international teachers, and with students from other countries. And yeah, they're not in the same physical space with them, but I think COIL is going to be, COIL programs are going to be a big part of the future of student mobility. And, there'll be some kind of a hybrid, I think, evolving out of this. But I think, as we say, the genie is out of the bottle, as when the pandemic hit, and I don't think we'll ever be able to put it back in completely. So artificial intelligence and technology in terms of your meetings, your travel, and your pedagogy, I think are going to remain in some degree.
Okay, thank you very much. We still have more questions from online participants. So the next questions, all right, it's addressed to Ibu Frances from Fahri. He is from the Language Defense Center. Can we apply AI to teach basic students, like beginner learners that learn the foreign language for the first time?
Hi, Fahri. Yes, definitely. You can use, because as I mentioned earlier in my presentation, AI tools or AI technology is not only the apps, but it's anything that you use using the machine, using the computer, using Google Translate, using even a simple Google browser where you practice pronunciation, as I showed earlier. I studied French using Duolingo. I'm still struggling, but I'm a beginner in that language, and I used Duolingo. The machine helps me to memorize the words, and I think it's very it's interesting for me as a language teacher to learn another language, my 4th foreign language, to be able to experience what my students are experiencing. So yes, we can apply the technology, whether it's AI injected or any technology, to teach beginner students as well. I hope that helps, Fahri.
Thank you. Do we still have questions from the offline participants, perhaps? Okay, if no question from the offline participants, we'll continue to the online participants. We have question from the next question from Dio Andespa from SMPN 1 Sungai Selan, Bangka Belitung. Okay, it's addressed to Ibu Frances again. Okay. Can you please point out or list issues or things that teachers need to pay attention when it comes to using Orai for beginner learners?
Okay, Pa or Bu Dio, beginner learners using Orai, Orai will identify, using the speech recognition feature, Orai will identify the speech, try to get the transcript. So there is nothing that we need to pay attention. We just let Orai does its magic, and then we get the transcript, and then we work with that with our students. For example, if Orai generates transcript and show that our students, especially in the beginner level, probably still have many wrong pronunciation, then we work on that. We train the students on how to pronounce it correctly, so that when they record themselves the next time using Orai, Orai will be able to recognize what they're saying, because Orai is still a machine. So there's no specific issue. I would say that Orai is a paid app now, so that's number one issue. If you don't want to pay 100,000 a month, you probably cannot use Ori in the full capacity of the app.
Okay, thank you. We still have two more questions actually from the online participants. Let me see the next questions. All right. Still for Ibu Frances. Okay, there are so many people excited about AI. Okay, this morning.
It feels like we're in the cerdas cermat, like.
Okay, it's hot and sexy issues.
I'm very happy about this, Ibu Francis. I'm very happy to listen to you.
I feel like, Parando, are you familiar with the TV quiz in schools in Indonesia? We have these schools competing against, like, I feel like we're the contestant and they're
tidak apa-apa, saya senang sekali.
Okay. All right, so let's see the questions. Okay, from Ibu Sari, SPD. If students always rely on technology, does it mean that they are cheating? And what do you think? And then the second question regarding to the use of technology to assist language learnings, do you think that pedagogy should follow technology, or is it the way around? Technology should follow pedagogy. Which one is more important?
I think I already answered that in my presentation, but thank you, Ibu, for the question. Definitely, I never think of technology first. It's always the class, the students first. It's not really even the pedagogy itself, but what are the students' needs? What are the objectives of the lessons? And you need to understand your own teaching context. If you're going to use a particular method of instruction, is it available to you? You don't want to force something that's not available to you, right? What kind of evaluation and feedback that the student needs to help them? And then after thinking about that, then I decide if I can use the help of AI. I always see artificial intelligence as something that will do something that we don't like to do. I don't like grading. I let our machine does that, for example. But the things that I like to do it myself. I don't want to let the machine does it for me. So I would highlight again and again that technology comes second, third, fourth, whatever, okay? It's not the main important thing. It's that because we are living now in the era where technology is everywhere, where we cannot live, like when you wake up in the morning, the first thing you reach is not, you see your phone, you just check your phone. So that's the situation now. And that's why technology seems like important, but it's not supposed to be the main thing in your teaching. If students rely on technology, does it mean that they are cheating? No, because as I mentioned earlier, when they record 20 times, yes, their presentation is not so impromptu anymore. It's not an impromptu speech. It's a well-prepared and practiced speech, but at least they learn language. At least they improve in their fluency. At least they improve in their pronunciation, in their vocabulary. They're reducing their filler if they're using Ori. So again, goes back to what is the objective of your course? What do you want your students to be able to master at the end of the lesson? I hope that answers your question, Ibu Sari.
Okay, so pedagogy first, technology comes second. All right, and the last question from the online participants. All right, the last question still for Ibu Frances.
Okay.
It's very sexy topic, yeah? So people are so eager to know more about AI. From Ibu Christine Permata, I don't know what LBUSD stands for. In implementing AI, we know that sometimes our students have problems with the internet since they are still residing in their hometowns. To anticipate these problems, do you prepare any backup plan? Could you please give us examples, especially for certain skills?
Of course, backup plans. As a teacher, even before the pandemic, before we go online, we always have plan A, plan B, plan C for our students, right? Teachers, do you still remember that moment when you teach face-to-face? So I don't emphasize on the technology, even though I love technology and I'm part of ITEL. We have a conference coming as well in July next year. Make sure teachers, you join us. But I try to make to lessen the stress of the students dealing with technology. My students come from all over Indonesia. My university, we are very proud to say that we are the miniature of Indonesia. We have students from Aceh to Papua. I'm training a lot of students from Bengkayang in Borneo, in Kalimantan, and they have difficult internet connection. So I know how difficult it is for my students, and I don't want to put emphasis on that. So when students have problems with the internet, I move to asynchronous teaching. That's why you use Flipgrid. Flipgrid is very good for speaking when they have an asynchronous, because my students, particularly in Bangkayang, they have to go to a center of the city, and it takes 1 hour to go there, and the public transportation only leaves at 11 in the morning sometimes. So if I put the deadline at noon, they said, can I submit it earlier, ma'am? Like, of course you can submit it earlier, because I have to catch the car back to my village. And it's fine. With Flipgrid, they can upload it, the video, and then they can download it, the recording, my feedback later on. So I always have plan A, plan B, plan C. Also, for no connection, you can print out if you're in a face-to-face teaching situation, like the masterpiece generator. We did that offline. So we print the fill in the blanks. We print it, and then we ask the students to work together in pairs, and they complete the blanks. And then we check with the masterpiece generator. So the teacher is the only one who needs to have the internet. But you can also prepare it ahead of time. So you don't really need to rely a lot on the internet or even on the electricity. But you can have the students learn according to what you have planned in your lesson plan to achieve your course lessons goal. I hope that helps, Ibu Christine Pramata.
Okay, thank you. So we have so many questions and also discussion. It's very interesting, but even I know that you still have some more questions. You may post a question later on. Maybe you can have the email address of both presenters to have more questions about the issue, but we are running out of time. So please give big round of applause for the presenters and also for all the participants who are actively engaged in this morning discussions. Thank you very much. But before we end these sessions, I think I want to share a quote from a statement from Dr. Yoo-hyun Park. He is the where is it? For example, if I'm not mistaken, he's the director of the Q Institute, that our future educations and workforce skilling discussion should not focus on how to teach individual to compete against the machines. Technology is only meaningful when it enhances humanity. A horse is, of course, faster than a humans, but we don't compete against a horse. We ride the horse. We should focus on how to ride and drive AI and technology, not run against it. Okay, I think that's all from our discussions this morning. Thank you very much for active participations. Once again, big applause for the participant and all of us. You may have the coffee now, but before, maybe we will have a photo session first. Where is it? The technicians at the back have prepared, and please be ready with your best expressions on my mark. Okay. 1, 2, 3. All right. Thank you very much. Okay, I think that's all. I'm Nia Kurniawati. I return the floor to the MC. Bye-bye. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Terima kasih. Thank you. Bye.
All right. Thank you very much for Ms. Nia, and also to our wonderful keynote speakers. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this will be the end of the plenary session 2. We will proceed to parallel session 2 at 10:35. And at 10:35, we will have about 5 minutes break. Now, let me remind you first, because the breakout room will be open for about 5 minutes later, which will be from 10:35. May we request all to self-join yourself to the breakout room according to your chosen room or topic. If you have any problems, you can type your chosen room in the chat box later. Thank you very much.
nggak apa-apa. Dia nggak masuk dan ya.
Tahukah Anda ada jaminan saldo kembali dari GoPay? Saldo kembali. Agar lebih jelas, bayangkan ini adalah loh, aduh, bukan kamu, Jack. Nah, bayangkan ini saldo GoPay Anda. GoPay. Jutaan orang sudah memiliki GoPay dengan kepribadian yang sesuai pemiliknya masing-masing. GoPay bisa membantu Anda bertransaksi di mana saja, bisa juga di top up. Karena GoPay setia dan istimewa, terkadang ada yang ingin mencurinya dengan berbagai cara dan modus. Modus. Nah, ini adalah modus-modusnya. Ketika HP Anda hilang, lalu diambil oleh pihak tak bertanggung jawab, mereka bisa mencuri saldo GoPay Anda.